The morning of March 15, 2019, started like any other chaotic day at the Maricopa County Superior Court in Phoenix. Maria Rodriguez clutched her worn leather purse with trembling hands as she navigated the maze of hallways, her 2-year-old daughter Emma bouncing excitedly in her arms. The custody hearing for Emma's future was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Maria's stomach churned with anxiety. Her ex-husband Carlos had been deployed to Afghanistan for 8 months, leaving behind a trail of legal complications that threatened to tear their already fractured family apart. Emma Rodriguez was no ordinary toddler. At just 2 years old, she possessed an unusual fascination with animals that bordered on the supernatural. Her bright brown eyes sparkled with intelligence far beyond her years, and she had an uncanny ability to calm even the most aggressive dogs with nothing more than a gentle touch and soft-spoken words. This gift, as Maria called it, had manifested early in Emma's life when they lived on the Fort Bragg military base, surrounded by working dogs and their handlers. The courthouse buzzed with its usual morning activity. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried past families, clutching manila folders filled with their most precious documents. Security guards monitored metal detectors, while maintenance workers mopped floors that would be dirty again within the hour. Nobody noticed the small figure in the pink flowered dress, who had somehow slipped away from her distracted mother during a heated argument with her attorney in the 3rd floor waiting area. Emma had always been drawn to adventure, and the courthouse's long, sterile hallways presented an irresistible playground. She followed a series of colorful directional arrows, painted on the walls red arrows pointing toward family court, blue toward civil proceedings, and most intriguingly, green arrows leading to areas marked authorized personnel only. To Emma, these weren't warnings. They were invitations to explore a secret world hidden within the boring adult building. Her tiny feet carried her past increasingly serious-looking doors, marked with official government seals and warning signs. She giggled at her reflection in the polished elevator doors and waved at stern-faced security cameras that tracked her movement through the restricted areas. The green arrows led her down a staircase she could barely navigate, her small hands gripping the cold metal railings as she descended into the courthouse's basement level. The basement felt different, colder, more serious, filled with sounds that made Emma's heart race with excitement rather than fear. She heard barking in the distance, sharp and commanding, unlike the playful yapping of neighborhood pets. These were working dogs, and something deep in Emma's genetic memory recognized the difference. Her father's voice echoed in her mind from before his deployment. Emma, working dogs are special. They have jobs to do, just like soldiers. As she wandered deeper into the restricted area, following the green arrows that seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lighting, Emma passed doors marked K9 Unit, Evidence Storage and Training Facility. The barking grew louder, more intense, accompanied by sharp human commands that echoed off concrete walls. Any normal child would have been terrified, but Emma pressed forward with the fearless curiosity that had defined her short life. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Maria Rodriguez was experiencing every parent's worst nightmare. She had turned away for just 30 seconds to argue with her attorney about custody arrangements, and when she looked back, Emma's small chair was empty. The pink sweater she'd been clutching was still there, but Emma had vanished as if she'd simply evaporated into the courthouse's bureaucratic atmosphere. Emma! Maria's voice cracked as she called out, drawing concerned looks from other families waiting for their court proceedings. Security guards were immediately alerted, and within minutes, the courthouse's lockdown protocol was activated. All exits were monitored, and security cameras throughout the building began scanning for any sign of the missing toddler. But Emma was already beyond their immediate reach, having discovered something that would change her life forever. At the end of the Green Arrow Trail, She found herself standing before a heavy metal door marked Canine Training Facility. Authorized. Personnel only. Danger. The door's imposing appearance meant nothing to a 2-year-old who saw only an opportunity for adventure. Inside that room, Officer Jake Sullivan was putting his partner through the most intensive training of their career. Together, Thunder, a 5-year-old German Shepherd weighing 90 pounds of pure muscle and determination, was Phoenix PD's most successful narcotics detection dog. With 3 major drug busts, 2 escaped convict captures, and countless routine successes. Under his collar, Thunder represented the pinnacle of police dog training and discipline. Sullivan had been working with Thunder since the dog was 8 weeks old, molding him into a precision instrument of law enforcement. Thunder's bite force could exert 238 pounds of pressure per square inch, and his reaction time to potential threats was measured in milliseconds. He was trained to neutralize first and assess later, a philosophy that had kept Sullivan alive during some of Phoenix's most dangerous police operations. The training session that morning focused on controlled aggression scenarios, teaching Thunder to differentiate between passive bystanders and active threats. Using padded suits and carefully choreographed exercises, Sullivan was reinforcing Thunder's most crucial skill, the ability to instantly switch from calm companion to deadly protector when the situation demanded it. As Emma's small hand reached for the door handle, neither she nor the 2 professionals inside could have predicted that this innocent moment of childhood curiosity was about to create a collision between 2 worlds that should never have intersected. The security footage would later show Emma standing on her tiptoes, using both hands to turn the heavy handle, her face bright with anticipation as she prepared to meet whatever waited on the other side. The door swung open with a metallic creak that echoed through the training facility like a gunshot. Thunder's head snapped toward the sound, his body instantly shifting into high alert mode as his training kicked in. Sullivan spun around, expecting to see another officer or perhaps a maintenance worker who had ignored the warning signs. Instead, he saw something that froze his blood, a tiny figure in a pink dress, standing silhouetted against the harsh hallway lighting, completely unaware that she had just walked into the most dangerous room in the entire courthouse. Emma Rodriguez had found her adventure, but she had also found something else, a destiny that would challenge everything the criminal justice system thought it knew about the bond between humans and their 4-legged partners in the fight against crime. Time seemed to freeze as Thunder's massive head swiveled toward the unexpected intrusion. His triangular ears shot forward, and every muscle in his powerful frame coiled like a loaded spring. Officer Jake Sullivan's heart hammered against his rib cage as he watched his partner transform from training companion to lethal weapon in the span of a heartbeat. Thunder's lips curled back, revealing ivory fangs that had been responsible for ending the careers of multiple drug dealers and violent criminals across Phoenix. Emma Rodriguez stood in the doorway, completely oblivious to the mortal danger radiating from the 90-pound German Shepherd just 15 feet away. Her chubby fingers still gripped the heavy metal door handle, and her brown eyes sparkled with the pure delight of a child who had discovered something wonderful. She was wearing her favorite pink dress with tiny flowers embroidered along the thin. The same dress Maria had carefully selected that morning, hoping it would make a good impression during the custody hearing that would determine Emma's future. Jesus Christ, Sullivan whispered under his breath, his hand instinctively moving toward his service weapon before he caught himself. Shooting in the direction of a toddler was unthinkable, but Thunder was already in full alert mode, his training overriding years of careful conditioning. The dog had been programmed to respond to unexpected intrusions with immediate and overwhelming force. 3 years of intensive training had created an animal that could differentiate between a child's laugh and a criminal's attempt at stealth. But all that training meant nothing when the child appeared in a restricted area during active combat preparation. Thunder's hackles rose along his spine like a mohawk of bristling fur. His brown eyes locked onto Emma with laser-like intensity, calculating distance, assessing threat level, preparing to neutralize what his instincts told him was an unidentified intruder. Sullivan had seen that look dozens of times before. Always. In the seconds before Thunder launched himself at suspects who had made the fatal mistake of challenging a Phoenix police dog. "Easy, boy," Sullivan said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Any sudden movement or loud sound could trigger Thunder's attack response, and Sullivan knew that once his partner committed to an assault, nothing could stop the devastating consequences that would follow. The dog's powerful jaws could crush bones, and his weight alone could knock a grown man unconscious. Against a 2-year-old child, Thunder's trained aggression would be absolutely fatal. But something extraordinary happened in that moment of maximum tension. Instead of screaming or running away like any rational person would do when confronted by a snarling police dog, Emma Rodriguez did something that defied every law of human survival instinct. She smiled. "Hi, doggy," she said in her sweet, high-pitched voice, completely unaware that she was addressing one of the most dangerous animals in the entire state of Arizona. Her tone carried the same delighted recognition she might use when spotting a butterfly or finding a pretty flower. To Emma, Thunder wasn't a weapon. He was simply another 4-legged friend waiting to be discovered. Thunder's snarl faltered. His ears twitched forward, then back, as if his brain was struggling to process information that contradicted everything in his behavioral programming. Children were supposed to be afraid of him. Intruders were supposed to run, fight, or freeze in terror. They weren't supposed to greet him like a beloved family pet. Emma took a small step forward, her tiny sneakers squeaking against the polished concrete floor. Sullivan's blood pressure spiked as he calculated the distance between his partner and the oblivious child. One lunge from Thunder would cover the gap in less than 2 seconds, ending this impossible scenario in tragedy that would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. "Nice doggy," Emma continued, extending her small hand toward Thunder with the fearless confidence that only very young children possess. Her palm was turned upward in what animal behaviorists call the universal gesture of peaceful intention, though Emma had no way of knowing. She was speaking a language older than human civilization itself. Thunder's response contradicted every principle of police dog training. Instead of attacking the approaching figure, he took a single step backward. His tail, which had been rigid with tension, began to wag almost imperceptibly. The change was so subtle that only someone who knew Thunder intimately could have detected it, but Sullivan noticed immediately. His partner was confused, not aggressive. "That's impossible," Sullivan muttered, watching in amazement as Thunder's body language shifted from predator to curiosity. The dog's head tilted slightly to one side, a gesture Sullivan had seen thousands of times when Thunder was trying to understand a new command or puzzle out an unfamiliar situation. Emma continued her slow advance, chattering away in the nonsensical stream of words that all toddlers use when they're excited about something. But mixed in with her babbled syllables were sounds that made Sullivan's spine tingle with recognition. Soft clicking noises, low humming tones, and gentle whistles that sounded remarkably similar to the communication techniques used by military dog handlers. Where did she learn that? Sullivan wondered aloud, but there was no one to answer his question. He was trapped in this impossible moment, watching his carefully trained police dog respond to a 2-year-old child as if she were an experienced handler giving him complex instructions. Thunder lowered his massive head, bringing his face closer to Emma's eye level. His tail wagged more noticeably now, and the aggressive tension drained from his powerful muscles like air escaping from a balloon. When Emma reached out to touch his muzzle, Thunder didn't snap or retreat. He held perfectly still, allowing the tiny fingers to scratch behind. His ears with the expertise of someone who had performed this ritual countless times before. "Good boy," Emma whispered, and Thunder's tail began to wag with genuine enthusiasm. The transformation was so complete and so sudden that Sullivan wondered if he was hallucinating from stress. His partner, the dog, who had single-handedly apprehended armed criminals and located millions of dollars worth of hidden narcotics, was acting like an overgrown puppy in the presence of a toddler who shouldn't have been able to get within 50 feet of him. The security cameras mounted in the corners of the training facility captured every second of this unprecedented encounter, recording footage that would later be analyzed by animal behaviorists, child psychologists, and law enforcement experts across the country. But in that moment, Sullivan was focused on only one thing: keeping everyone alive until he could figure out how to safely extract Emma from a situation that should have been impossible from the very beginning. Then Emma did something that made Sullivan's jaw drop. She wrapped her tiny arms around Thunder's thick neck and hugged him with the unreserved affection that children show to their favorite stuffed animals. Thunder not only tolerated the embrace, he seemed to enjoy it, his tail wagging so hard it created a rhythmic thumping sound against the concrete wall. "I don't believe this," Sullivan said, pulling out his radio to call for backup, child services, and probably a psychiatrist to help him process what he had just witnessed. But as he watched Emma whisper secrets into Thunder's attentive ear, he realized that this was only the beginning of a story that would challenge everything he thought. He knew about the bond between humans and the animals who serve alongside them. When a mother's love becomes a weapon, Maria Rodriguez's world shattered the moment security guard, Captain Robert Kane, knocked on the conference room door. She had been pacing frantically for 47 minutes, her attorney Richard Vasquez fielding increasingly urgent calls from courthouse security while trying to maintain the illusion that everything was under control. The custody hearing had been postponed indefinitely, but that was the least of Maria's concerns now. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Captain Kane said, his weathered face grave with the kind of expression that delivered life-changing news. "We found your daughter." The relief that flooded through Maria's body lasted exactly 3 seconds until she saw Kane's hesitation. The way his eyes avoided direct contact, the manila folder clutched in his hands like evidence at a crime scene. Her mother's instinct, honed by 2 years of single parenthood and military wife anxiety, immediately detected the unspoken "but" that followed his words. "Where is she?" Maria demanded, her voice rising an octave. "Is she hurt? What happened?" Kane glanced at Vasquez, then back at Maria. "She's fine, Mom. Physically fine. But there's been an incident. Your daughter somehow gained access to our canine training facility in the basement level. She encountered one of our police dogs during active training exercises." The blood drained from Maria's face as the implications hit her like a physical blow. She had grown up in Phoenix, had read the newspaper stories about police dogs attacking suspects, had seen the photos of criminals hospitalized after encounters with K9 units. Her tiny, trusting, fearless Emma had somehow wandered into that world of controlled violence and professional danger. "Oh my God," Maria whispered, sinking into a chair as her legs gave out. "What did that animal do to my baby?" "Ma'am, that's what's so unusual about this situation," Kane continued, opening his folder to reveal a stack of printed photographs that would haunt Maria's dreams for months to come. "Your daughter wasn't attacked. In fact, the opposite happened. She somehow befriended the dog. These are security camera screenshots from the incident." Maria's hands trembled as she examined the photographs. The first image showed Emma standing in a doorway, facing a massive German shepherd in full attack posture. The second captured the moment the dog's aggression began to fade. The third, fourth, and fifth photos documented something impossible: her 2-year-old daughter petting hugging and playing with what appeared to be one of the most dangerous animals in the building. "This is impossible," Maria breathed, studying each photograph with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. "Emma's never been around police dogs. She doesn't know how to ... How did she ... But even as she spoke the words, Maria felt the first stirring of a memory she had tried to suppress for months. Fort Bragg, the military base where Emma had spent her first year of life, surrounded by working dogs and their handlers. Carlos had insisted it was perfectly safe, that the dogs were highly trained professionals who posed no threat to families on base. Maria had trusted him then, but after their marriage fell apart, she had convinced herself that Emma's early exposure to military animals had been a mistake, a dangerous environment that could have scarred her daughter for life. Looking at these photographs, Maria realized she might have been wrong about more than just the dogs. Captain Kane cleared his throat. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to be completely honest with you. What your daughter did today, the way she approached and interacted with Thunder, our most aggressive patrol dog, it should have been impossible. Officer Sullivan has 15 years of experience with K9 units, and he's never seen anything like it. That dog has been trained to neutralize threats immediately and without hesitation." Maria's shock began transforming into something far more dangerous. Rage. The protective fury that only mothers possess when their children have been endangered, began building in her chest like a pressure cooker approaching explosion. Her hands clenched into fists as she processed the full magnitude of what had happened. "You're telling me," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "that my 2-year-old daughter was able to walk into a restricted area of this courthouse, enter a room with a trained attack dog, and nobody stopped her? Nobody noticed a toddler wandering around your basement?" Kane shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, there's an ongoing investigation into how she accessed that area. Our preliminary findings suggest that a maintenance door was left unlocked during routine cleaning and maintenance." "Door?" Maria exploded, rising from her chair with such force that Vasquez instinctively stepped backward. "You're going to blame this on a maintenance door? My daughter could have been killed because someone forgot to lock a door?" Richard Vasquez, sensing opportunity in his client's righteous anger, began taking notes furiously. 25 years of personal injury law had taught him to recognize million-dollar negligence cases when they walked through his door, and this situation had all the elements of a courthouse catastrophe that would make headlines across the state. "Maria, please sit down," Vasquez said gently. "Captain Kane, I need copies of all security footage, incident reports, and documentation related to this event. My client's daughter was placed in mortal danger due to what appears to be gross negligence on the part of courthouse security." Kane nodded grimly. "Already prepared, counselor. But I should warn you, this case is going to be ... complicated. The footage shows some things that our experts can't explain. Your daughter demonstrated knowledge and behavior that shouldn't be possible for a child her age." Maria snatched the photographs from Kane's hands, studying them again with new eyes. In one image, Emma appeared to be making hand gestures that looked almost like military signals. In another, her posture mimicked the stance Maria had seen Carlos use when working with dogs on base. The realization hit her like ice water. Emma hadn't just survived this encounter by luck. She had somehow drawn upon knowledge and instincts that should have been buried beneath 2 years of civilian life. "I want to see the full video," Maria demanded. "All of it. And I want to talk to this Officer Sullivan immediately." Kane exchanged glances with Vasquez. "Ma'am, Officer Sullivan is... He's pretty shaken up by this whole thing. He's been working with Thunder for 3 years, and he says he's never seen his partner respond to anyone the way he responded to your daughter. He's requesting time to process what happened before giving his official statement." Maria's anger reached a boiling point. the courthouse's attempts at damage control, the casual way they discussed her daughter's brush with death, the implication that Emma had somehow been responsible for her own safety, it all combined into a fury that demanded justice. Process what happened? She snarled. I'll tell you what happened. Your security failed. Your protocols failed. Your supposedly trained professionals nearly let my baby get mauled by a police dog. And now you want time to come up with excuses? She turned to Vasquez, her eyes blazing with determination. Richard, I want to sue them for everything there. Worth, negligence, child endangerment, emotional distress. I don't care what it takes. I want that dog removed from service. I want Officer Sullivan fired. And I want to make sure this never happens to another family. Vasquez nodded, already calculating settlement figures in his head. Maria, based on what I'm seeing here, we have grounds for a substantial lawsuit. The county's insurance company will want to settle quickly and quietly to avoid the publicity nightmare this could become. But Maria wasn't thinking about money. She was thinking about the impossible photographs in her hands, the questions they raised about Emma's hidden abilities, and the growing suspicion that her ex-husband had left their daughter with more than just memories from her time on the military base. The war for Emma's future was about to begin, and Maria Rodriguez was prepared to fight battles she never imagined she would face. When science meets the supernatural, Judge Sarah Martinez had presided over some of the most sensational cases in Arizona legal history, but nothing had prepared her for the media frenzy that erupted around Rodriguez v. Maricopa County. By 7 a.m. on the first day of testimony, news vans from every major network lined the courthouse steps like a mechanical army. Reporters clutched steaming coffee cups and practiced their opening lines while cameramen adjusted equipment that would broadcast this unprecedented case to millions of viewers across the nation. The story had everything that modern media craved: an adorable toddler in mortal danger, a trained police dog with a violent reputation, courthouse security failures, and the kind of mysterious circumstances that launched conspiracy theories. On social media platforms, #ToddlerVsThunder had become a trending hashtag overnight, generating thousands of posts from animal rights activists, child safety advocates, and amateur detectives who analyzed the security footage frame by frame. Inside Courtroom 7A, the atmosphere crackled with tension and barely contained chaos. Maria Rodriguez sat in the front row, clutching a worn photograph of Emma taken just hours before the incident. A smiling 2-year-old in her pink flower dress, completely unaware that she was about to become the center of a legal battle that would challenge fundamental assumptions about animal behavior and child development. Richard Vasquez, Maria's attorney, had spent 3 weeks preparing his opening statement, but he knew that no amount of preparation could fully capture the emotional impact of what the jury was about to witness. The security footage from this K-9 training facility had been enhanced, slowed down, and analyzed by multiple experts. Yet it remained as inexplicable as it was terrifying. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Vasquez began, his voice carrying the gravitas of someone who understood the historic nature of this case. You are about to see something that will challenge everything you think you know about courthouse security, police dog training, and the safety of our most vulnerable citizens. What happened on March 15th wasn't just a security failure. It was a miracle masquerading as a near tragedy. The county's defense team, led by seasoned attorney Catherine Walsh, faced an almost impossible task. How do you defend the indefensible? How do you explain why a 2-year-old child was able to access the most dangerous area of a government building? Their strategy relied heavily on the fact that no actual harm had occurred, but they knew that argument would ring hollow to parents imagining their own children in Emma's situation. The courtroom's gallery was packed with an unusual mix of spectators. Local parents sat alongside animal behaviorists who had flown in from universities across the country. Police officers filled an entire section, many of them canine handlers curious about the dog that had apparently violated every principle of their training. Child development experts whispered among themselves, trying to understand how a toddler had demonstrated knowledge that typically took years to acquire. The first week of testimony focused on the technical aspects of the case. Security experts dissected the courthouse's protocols, revealing a shocking pattern of negligence that went far beyond a single unlocked door. The K-9 unit's training procedures came under intense scrutiny, with former handlers testifying about Thunder's aggressive history and the numerous suspects who had required hospitalization after encounters with the German Shepherd. Officer Jake Sullivan took the stand on Thursday morning, visibly shaken even 3 weeks after the incident. His testimony provided the first detailed account of what had actually happened in that training room, and his description of Emma's behavior sent murmurs of disbelief rippling through the courtroom. "I've been working with police dogs for 15 years, Sullivan testified, his voice steady despite the obvious emotional toll. "I've seen hundreds of people interact with K-9 units, criminals, victims, fellow officers, children, during school demonstrations. What Emma Rodriguez did in that room, it wasn't luck, and it wasn't accident. She knew exactly how to communicate with Thunder." Vasquez pressed for details. "Officer Sullivan, can you describe specifically what you observed about Emma's behavior?" Sullivan paused, clearly struggling to find words for something that defied explanation. "She used hand signals that looked like military commands. She made vocalizations, clicking sounds, soft whistles. It sounded like the communication techniques we use in advanced training. When she approached Thunder, her body language was perfect. Submissive but confident, non-threatening but assertive. It was like watching a miniature version of our most experienced handlers." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Several jury members leaned forward, their faces reflecting the same confusion and amazement that had gripped everyone who had witnessed the security footage. Judge Martinez called for order, but even she seemed stunned by Sullivan's testimony. Catherine Walsh, the defense attorney, seized on Sullivan's admissions during cross-examination. "Officer Sullivan, if Emma Rodriguez demonstrated such advanced knowledge, doesn't that suggest she had prior training or exposure to police dogs?" "That's what I can't understand," Sullivan replied. "According to her mother's statements, Emma has never been around police dogs, but what I saw, it was like she had been raised by professional handlers." The mystery deepened when Dr. Amanda Foster took the stand as the prosecution's expert witness. A world-renowned animal behaviorist from Arizona State University, Dr. Foster had spent her career studying interspecies communication and had authored dozens of papers on canine behavior patterns. Her analysis of the security footage would provide the scientific foundation for arguments that would resonate far beyond this single courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Foster began, clicking to the first slide of her presentation, "what you're about to see represents the most extraordinary example of spontaneous human-animal communication ever documented. This footage has been analyzed using motion capture technology, acoustic analysis software, and behavioral pattern recognition algorithms. The results are unprecedented. The courtroom's large screen filled with enhanced images from the security cameras, showing Emma's approach frame by frame. Dr. Foster used a laser pointer to highlight specific details that had been invisible to casual observers. "Note the child's posture in frame 47, she explained. Her shoulders are lowered. Her head is tilted at precisely the angle that canines interpret as non-threatening submission. In frame 52, observe her hand position palm up, fingers slightly curved, matching the exact gesture used by professional dog handlers to indicate peaceful intention." The jury watched in fascination as Dr. Foster deconstructed Emma's every movement, revealing a level of sophisticated animal communication that seemed impossible for a 2-year-old child. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Now, let's examine the acoustic analysis, Dr. Foster continued, switching to a new slide that showed audio waveforms and frequency patterns. The sounds Emma made during this encounter weren't random baby talk. They correspond precisely to the frequency ranges and tonal patterns used in military and police dog training commands. A hush fell over the courtroom as the implications became clear. Emma Rodriguez hadn't just survived a dangerous encounter. Through luck, she had actively prevented it through knowledge and skills that she shouldn't have possessed. Vasquez stood for redirect examination, knowing that Dr. Foster's testimony had just transformed his case from a simple negligence claim into something far more complex and mysterious. Dr. Foster, in your professional opinion, how could a 2-year-old child demonstrate this level of canine communication expertise? Dr. Foster paused, her expression reflecting the scientific caution of someone who had spent years distinguishing between observation and speculation. Based on the evidence, there are only 2 possible explanations. Either Emma Rodriguez is a once-in-a-generation prodigy with an intuitive understanding of animal behavior that defies current scientific knowledge, or she has been exposed to intensive dog training protocols at some point in her short life. The courtroom fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of this statement. In the gallery, Maria Rodriguez felt her heart racing as suppressed memories from Fort Bragg began surfacing with uncomfortable clarity. Emma's father, Carlos, had been more than just a soldier. He had been a specialist in military working dog operations, and Emma had spent her first year of life immersed in that world. Judge Martinez called for a recess, but the real drama was just beginning. The case that had started as a simple negligence lawsuit was about to expose secrets that would challenge everything the legal system thought it understood about the extraordinary bond between humans and the animals who serve alongside them in humanity's most dangerous endeavors. When the past refuses to stay buried, the courtroom's atmosphere shifted dramatically when Catherine Walsh, the defense attorney, stood for cross-examination of Dr. Foster. What had begun as damage control for Maricopa County was about to become something far more explosive, a revelation that would shatter Maria Rodriguez's carefully constructed version of her daughter's history and expose secrets that reached from Phoenix to the battlefields of Afghanistan. Dr. Foster, Walsh began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had just discovered a game-changing piece of evidence. Your testimony suggests that Emma Rodriguez demonstrated knowledge typically acquired through intensive training. Are you familiar with the concept of imprinted learning in early childhood development? Dr. Foster nodded cautiously. Yes, counselor. Imprinted learning refers to knowledge and behavioral patterns acquired during critical developmental periods, usually between birth and 18 months. These patterns can remain dormant for years before being triggered by specific environmental stimuli. Walsh approached the witness stand with a manila folder that seemed to glow with importance under the courtroom's fluorescent lighting. Dr. Foster, would it surprise you to learn that Emma Rodriguez spent the first 14 months of her life on Fort Bragg military base, where her father served as a specialist in military working dog operations? The courtroom erupted. Maria Rodriguez shot to her feet, her face flushing with a mixture of shock and betrayal. That's not relevant, she shouted, but her voice cracked with a telltale strain of someone whose deepest secrets were being dragged into public view. Judge Martinez banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order as reporters scribbled frantically, and photographers captured Maria's reaction from every conceivable angle. The revelation had transformed the entire nature of the case in a single sentence, shifting focus from courthouse negligence to the extraordinary capabilities of a child shaped by circumstances beyond anyone's imagination. Richard Vasquez leaped to his feet, his face pale with the realization that his carefully constructed negligence case was collapsing in real time. Objection, Your Honor. This information is prejudicial and irrelevant to the security failures. That put my client's daughter in danger. But Judge Martinez was already reviewing documents that Walsh had submitted as evidence military records, base housing assignments, and most damaging of all, photographs showing infant Emma surrounded by military working dogs and their handlers during training exercises on Fort Bragg. Overruled, Judge Martinez said grimly. The witness may answer. Dr. Foster studied the photographs with the intense focus of a scientist examining specimens under a microscope. Her expression shifted from professional curiosity to barely contained amazement as she processed the implications of what she was seeing. This changes everything, Dr. Foster said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of a scientific paradigm shift. If Emma Rodriguez was exposed to military working dog protocols during her critical imprinting period, then her behavior in the courthouse makes perfect sense. She wasn't demonstrating impossible knowledge. She was accessing deeply embedded memories and behavioral patterns formed during the most crucial developmental stage of her life. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the full magnitude of this revelation sank in. Emma hadn't been a miraculous prodigy who spontaneously understood police dog behavior. She had been a military child raised in an environment where working dogs were as common as playground equipment, where the sounds of training commands and the sight of human-canine partnerships were part of her daily reality from birth. Maria Rodriguez sank into her chair, her hands trembling as suppressed memories flooded back with devastating clarity. Carlos working with his military dogs in their backyard, while Emma crawled around their feet. The sound of training whistles and commands that had been the soundtrack to their daughter's infancy. Emma's first steps taken toward a German shepherd that Carlos had brought home for socialization training. Walsh pressed her advantage, sensing that she had found the key to transforming her impossible defense into a compelling narrative of human resilience and extraordinary circumstances. Dr. Foster, in your professional opinion, what would be the long-term effects of such early exposure to military working dog protocols? Dr. Foster consulted her notes, but her answer came from decades of research into childhood development and animal behavior. Imprinted learning during the critical period creates neural pathways that remain intact throughout life. Emma would have absorbed not just the sounds and visual cues associated with working dogs, but also the emotional frameworks, the understanding that these animals are partners, not threats. She would have learned to read canine body language at the same developmental stage when most children are learning to distinguish colors. The implications rippled through the courtroom like shock waves. Jury members exchanged glances that reflected a mixture of amazement and confusion. How do you hold a county responsible for failing to predict that a toddler would possess the instinctual knowledge of a trained professional? But Walsh wasn't finished. She approached Maria Rodriguez with the relentless determination of a prosecutor, closing in on a confession. Mrs. Rodriguez, isn't it true that you deliberately concealed your daughter's military background because you were ashamed of her father's service? Objection! Vasquez shouted, but his protest lacked conviction. The damage was already done, and everyone in the courtroom could see the truth written across Maria's anguished face. I'll allow it, Judge Martinez said quietly. The witness will answer. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. Carlos and I divorced because I couldn't handle the military life anymore. I wanted Emma to have a normal childhood, away from all that intensity. I thought if we left the base, if we never talked about the dogs or the training or any of it, she could just be a regular little girl. The courtroom held its collective breath as Maria continued, tears streaming down her face. But she never stopped asking about the dogs. Even after we moved to Phoenix, even after months went by, she would make those sounds, the clicking, the whistles, and I would tell her to stop. I thought I was protecting her from that world. Walsh's voice softened slightly. recognizing that she was no longer cross-examining a hostile witness, but listening to a mother's confession of guilt and regret. Mrs. Rodriguez, when you saw the security footage of Emma with Thunder, what was your first thought? Maria looked across the courtroom at the gallery, where several police officers sat, watching this unprecedented case unfold. Her voice gained strength as she spoke a truth that had been buried beneath months of denial and fear. My first thought was that she looked exactly like her father. The way she stood, the way she moved, the complete confidence she had with that dog. It was like watching Carlos work with his military partners. And I realized that no matter how hard I tried to erase that part of her life, it was still there. It had always been there. The revelation sent shockwaves through the legal proceedings and the media coverage that followed. Social media exploded, with debates about military families, childhood development, and the indelible impact of early experiences. Hashtag military kid joined hashtag toddler vs Thunder as trending hashtags, generating thousands of posts from military spouses sharing their own stories of children shaped by unique circumstances. Dr. Foster was recalled to the stand for additional testimony. That would reshape scientific understanding of imprinted learning and human-animal relationships. Her research team at Arizona State University immediately began designing studies to explore how early exposure to working animals might create lifelong behavioral patterns and communication abilities. But the most profound impact was felt by Maria Rodriguez herself, who found herself confronting the realization that her attempts to protect Emma from her military heritage had actually denied her daughter access to an extraordinary gift. As she watched Emma playing contentedly in the courthouse child care center, completely unaware of the legal and scientific revolution swirling around her, Maria began to understand that some legacies cannot be erased, they can only be embraced or denied. The case that had begun with a mother's fury over security failures had become something far more complex, an examination of identity, heritage, and the mysterious ways that love expresses itself across species and generations. And in a courthouse basement in Phoenix, a German shepherd named Thunder waited patiently for the day when he might see his small friend again. When four legs speak louder than words, Judge Sarah Martinez had presided over thousands of cases during her 23-year career on the bench, but she had never faced a request quite like the one Catherine Walsh presented on Friday morning. The defense attorney stood before the court with emotion so unprecedented that it would either revolutionize legal proceedings or become the most spectacular courtroom disaster in Arizona history. Your Honor, Walsh began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. The defense requests permission to demonstrate Thunder's training and temperament in this courtroom. Given that this case hinges on whether Thunder posed a genuine threat to Emma Rodriguez, we believe the jury deserves to observe his behavior firsthand under controlled conditions. The gallery erupted in whispers that Judge Martinez silenced with a sharp rap of her gavel. Richard Vasquez shot to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. Objection, Your Honor. This is a courtroom, not a circus. Bringing a trained attack dog into the presence of jurors, spectators, and court personnel represents an unacceptable safety risk. But Walsh had anticipated this objection and came prepared with precedents that stretched back decades. Your Honor, federal courts have allowed firearm demonstrations, forensic reconstructions, and even controlled explosions when relevant to the case at hand. Thunder is a sworn officer of the Phoenix Police Department with an impeccable service record. Under proper supervision, his presence poses no greater risk than any other piece of evidence. Judge Martinez found herself in uncharted legal territory. The case had already shattered conventional boundaries, and she knew that her decision would be scrutinized by legal scholars, animal rights activists, and law enforcement agencies across the country. After a 15-minute recess to consult with court administrators and security personnel, she returned with a ruling that would make history. The court will allow the demonstration under the following conditions, Judge Martinez announced. Thunder will remain on a secure leash at all times, handled exclusively by Officer Sullivan. All spectators must remain seated unless otherwise directed by court security. And if I detect even the slightest indication of danger, this demonstration will end immediately. The courtroom transformation began immediately. Bailiffs cleared a central area large enough for Thunder's demonstration while EMT personnel positioned themselves strategically around the room. Dr. Amanda Foster was sworn in as a real-time expert observer, tasked with providing commentary on Thunder's behavior as the demonstration unfolded. When Officer Jake Sullivan entered the courtroom leading Thunder on a reinforced leash, the atmosphere became electric with tension and anticipation. The German Shepherd's presence filled the space with an energy that was both majestic and intimidating. At 90 pounds of pure muscle and trained precision, Thunder represented the pinnacle of police dog evolution, a living weapon disguised as man's best friend. Thunder's dark eyes swept the courtroom with professional assessment, cataloging faces, identifying potential threats, and maintaining the hyper-vigilant awareness that had made him one of Phoenix PD's most successful canine officers. His black and tan coat gleamed under the fluorescent lighting, and every muscle in his powerful frame spoke of countless hours of training and conditioning. Officer Sullivan, Walsh began, please demonstrate Thunder's basic obedience commands. What followed was a masterclass in human-canine partnership. Thunder executed sit, stay, heel, and down commands with military precision, his responses instantaneous and flawless. Jurors watched in fascination as Sullivan demonstrated the complex hand signals and verbal cues that transformed Thunder from companion to professional instrument. Now, Walsh continued, please show the court Thunder's narcotics detection capabilities. Sullivan produced a series of sealed containers, explaining that one contained trace amounts of cocaine, while the others held innocent substances. Thunder's search was methodical and thorough, his nose working with the precision of a laboratory instrument. When he located the target container, he sat immediately and stared at it with unwavering focus, the passive alert that had led to dozens of successful arrests. The demonstration's true power lay not in Thunder's technical skills, but in the obvious bond between dog and handler. Sullivan's quiet confidence and Thunder's absolute trust created a partnership that transcended traditional notions of animal training. This wasn't dominance and submission. It was collaboration between two professionals who had learned to communicate across species barriers. But Walsh was building toward something more dramatic than routine demonstrations. Officer Sullivan, I'd like you to simulate the exact conditions that existed when Thunder encountered Emma Rodriguez. Please place Thunder in an alert, protective stance as he would have been during training exercises. Sullivan's expression grew serious as he positioned Thunder in the center of the courtroom and issued a series of commands that transformed the dog's demeanor completely. Thunder's ears snapped forward, his body coiled with barely contained energy, and his eyes locked onto the courtroom's main entrance as if expecting an imminent threat. The change was startling. Gone was the obedient companion from moments before, replaced by a predator whose every instinct was focused on protecting his territory and his partner. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they witnessed the transformation that had greeted Emma Rodriguez in that basement training facility. This, Sullivan announced to the silent courtroom, is Thunder in full alert mode. This is exactly how he appeared when Emma entered the training room. Dr. Foster provided running commentary from her position near the jury box. Note the elevation of Thunder's hackles, the forward positioning of his ears, the coiled tension in his hindquarters. Every aspect of his body language communicates readiness for immediate defensive action. The demonstration reached its climax when Walsh made her most audacious request. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to invite Emma Rodriguez to observe Thunder's response to her presence." The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of Maria Rodriguez's sharp intake of breath. The request was unprecedented, potentially dangerous, and absolutely crucial to the defense's case. If Emma could demonstrate her extraordinary ability in front of the jury, it would prove that Thunder's restraint hadn't been luck. It had been earned through communication, skills that defied conventional understanding. Judge Martinez weighed the risks carefully. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is entirely voluntary. If you have any reservations about your daughter's safety—" "She'll do it," Maria interrupted, surprising everyone, including herself. The revelations about Emma's military background had forced Maria to confront the truth about her daughter's extraordinary abilities. Emma has been asking about Thunder every day since the incident. She calls him her doggy. Emma Rodriguez entered the courtroom holding her mother's hand, completely oblivious to the historic nature of the moment she was about to create. At 2 years old, she saw only a room full of adults who seemed very interested in something she couldn't quite understand. Then she spotted Thunder. Her face lit up with recognition and joy as she pointed across the courtroom. "Doggy!" she exclaimed, her voice carrying the pure delight of a child reuniting with a beloved friend. Thunder's response was immediate and profound. The aggressive alertness drained from his posture as if someone had flipped a switch. His ears relaxed, his tail began a slow wag, and his intense stare transformed into something that could only be described as affection. Emma tugged free from her mother's grasp and began walking toward Thunder with the fearless confidence that had saved her life 3 weeks earlier. The courtroom held its collective breath as she approached the dog who should have been her greatest threat. "Hi, Thunder," Emma said softly, using the dog's name for the first time, a name no one had told her, a name she had somehow learned through their impossible connection. Thunder lay down immediately, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. She approached without hesitation, scratching behind his ears with the practiced technique of someone who had grown up around working dogs. Thunder's tail thunked against the courtroom floor, creating a rhythmic sound that seemed to echo the heartbeats of everyone watching this unprecedented moment. Dr. Foster's voice was barely above, a whisper as she provided scientific commentary on what was occurring. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the most extraordinary example of interspecies recognition and communication I have ever observed. Thunder is responding to Emma as he would to a trusted handler, someone he recognizes as part of his pack." The demonstration concluded with Emma sitting cross-legged beside Thunder, whispering secrets into his attentive ear while he remained perfectly still, his fierce reputation temporarily forgotten in the presence of the one person who spoke his ancient language of loyalty and trust. As Officer Sullivan led Thunder from the courtroom, the German shepherd turned back once to look at Emma, his dark eyes reflecting an intelligence and connection that transcended every boundary the legal system thought it understood about the relationship between humans and the animals who serve alongside them in society's most demanding roles. When a hero returns from war, the courtroom was still buzzing with whispered conversations about Thunder's extraordinary demonstration when the heavy oak doors at the back opened with a resounding crack that commanded immediate attention. Every head turned as a figure in military dress uniform stepped into the proceedings, his polished boots echoing against the marble floor with the measured cadence of someone accustomed to command. Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez had aged visibly during his 18-month deployment to Afghanistan. His once smooth face now bore the weathered lines of someone who had seen too much, and his dark eyes carried the distant look of a soldier who had left pieces of himself in foreign deserts. But when his gaze found Emma sitting in the gallery, clutching her mother's hand, his entire demeanor transformed from military, bearing to desperate fatherly love. Emma spotted him immediately. "Daddy!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the courtroom's formal atmosphere like a blade. She broke free from Maria's grasp and ran down the aisle with the unstoppable momentum of a child who had been waiting for this moment through countless lonely nights. Carlos caught his daughter in his arms, lifting her high as tears streamed down his face. The reunion was so powerful, so raw with emotion, that even Judge Martinez found herself reaching for tissues while maintaining the professional composure required of her position. Maria Rodriguez felt her world tilt on its axis as she watched. Her ex-husband embraced their daughter. The divorce papers had been finalized 6 months ago, but seeing Carlos in person brought flooding back all the complicated emotions she had tried to bury beneath anger and legal proceedings. He looked older, more serious, but when he smiled at Emma, she could see the man she had fallen in love with on that military base so many years ago. "Your Honor," Richard Vasquez said, rising to his feet with visible confusion. "We were not informed that Mr. Rodriguez would be testifying in these proceedings." Catherine Walsh stood as well, her expression revealing the satisfaction of someone who had saved her most powerful weapon for the perfect moment. "Your Honor, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was granted emergency leave from his deployment specifically to provide crucial testimony in this case. His expertise regarding military working dog operations is directly relevant to understanding Emma's extraordinary abilities." Judge Martinez studied the military records that Walsh submitted as evidence. Carlos Rodriguez's service file read like something from a military thriller novel: 3 tours of duty, multiple commendations for valor, and most importantly, certification as a master military working dog handler, one of only 47 soldiers in the entire U.S. Army to hold that elite designation. Carlos approached the witness stand with Emma still in his arms, unwilling to let go of the daughter he hadn't seen since before her 2nd birthday. His testimony would provide the final piece of the puzzle that had mystified experts, confounded legal scholars, and captured the imagination of millions following the case through media coverage. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Walsh began, "please describe your specialization within the Army." Carlos's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to briefing high-ranking officers under life-or-death circumstances. "I'm a master military working dog handler, ma'am. My primary responsibility is training and deploying canine units for specialized operations in combat zones. I've worked with over 40 different dogs during my career, including German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and specialized breeds trained for explosive detection, enemy tracking, and close protection operations." The courtroom listened in rapt attention as Carlos described a world that most civilians could never imagine: the intense bond between soldiers and their canine partners, the life-or-death situations where split-second communication could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Walsh continued, "were you present during Emma's early childhood development?" Carlos's expression softened as he looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in his lap with the complete trust that only children possess. "Yes, ma'am. Emma lived on Fort Bragg with Maria and me from birth until she was 14 months old. During that time, she was exposed daily to military working dog operations." The revelation that followed would rewrite everything the courtroom thought it understood about childhood, development, and military family life. Carlos described a world where infant Emma had been raised not just around dogs, but around the most elite canine professionals in the world. Emma's first sounds weren't typical baby babble, Carlos testified, his voice filled with wonder at the memories. She was making clicking noises and soft whistles that mimicked the communication signals I used with my working dogs. By the time she was 8 months old, she could calm agitated animals with sounds and gestures that took me years to master. Dr. Amanda Foster, still present as the court's expert witness, requested permission to question Carlos about the specific techniques he had observed. Her scientific curiosity was overwhelmed by the implications of what she was hearing. A child who had absorbed professional-level animal communication skills before she could walk or talk. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Dr. Foster asked, can you describe specific instances of Emma's early interaction with military working dogs? Carlos's testimony painted a picture that seemed almost fantastical. Emma crawling fearlessly among German shepherds trained for combat operations. Emma making specific vocalizations that caused highly trained guard dogs to lie down and present their bellies for scratching. Emma, at barely 1 year old, successfully calming a Belgian Malinois that had been aggressive toward all other children. The dogs recognized her as Pack, Carlos explained. It wasn't training or technique. It was something deeper. Emma understood them at a level that most handlers never achieve, even after years of experience. But Carlos's most shocking revelation was yet to come. When Walsh asked about Emma's current abilities, he described video calls from Afghanistan, where Emma had successfully calmed distressed military dogs through a computer screen, using only her voice and hand gestures to communicate across thousands of miles. Your Honor, Carlos said, addressing Judge Martinez directly, my daughter possesses a gift that could revolutionize how we train and deploy working dogs in military and law enforcement operations. What happened with Thunder wasn't an accident or a miracle. It was Emma accessing abilities that she's possessed since birth. The courtroom fell silent as the full magnitude of Carlos's testimony sank in. This wasn't just about courthouse security failures or legal liability. It was about a child whose extraordinary abilities could transform human-animal partnerships in ways that no one had previously imagined. Maria Rodriguez found herself confronting emotions she had tried to suppress for months. Watching Carlos testify about Emma's gifts, seeing the pride and wonder in his eyes as he described their daughter's abilities, she realized that her attempts to create a normal life for Emma had been denying their daughter access to something truly special. Richard Vasquez requested a brief recess to consult with his client, but the damage to his negligence case was irreversible. How do you hold a county responsible for failing to predict that a toddler would possess the instinctual knowledge of a master military handler? As the court recessed, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of the adversarial positioning that had characterized the proceedings, the various parties began gravitating toward collaboration. Dr. Foster approached Carlos to discuss research opportunities. Officer Sullivan expressed interest in learning techniques that could improve his partnership with Thunder. Even county officials began recognizing that Emma's abilities represented an opportunity rather than a liability. The case that had begun with a mother's fury over security failures was transforming into something unprecedented, a recognition that some gifts transcend legal boundaries and some partnerships between humans and animals operate at levels that challenge our understanding of communication, loyalty, and love. As Emma slept peacefully in her father's arms, surrounded by the legal and scientific professionals who had been arguing about her fate, it became clear that the real resolution would require not courtroom victories or financial settlements, but a new understanding of what it means to honor extraordinary abilities while protecting the children who possess them. The alliance forming in that Phoenix courtroom would soon extend far beyond the boundaries of Arizona, creating programs and partnerships that would transform how society approaches the ancient bond between humans and the working animals who serve alongside them in humanity's most challenging endeavors. When love builds bridges across species 6 months after the final gavel fell in Rodriguez v. Maricopa County, the Phoenix Police Department's training facility bore little resemblance to the sterile basement room where Emma Rodriguez had first encountered Thunder. Colorful murals depicting children and dogs working together now decorated walls that had once been institutional gray. Soft play areas with age-appropriate equipment occupied corners where intimidating training apparatus had previously dominated the space. Judge Sarah Martinez's unprecedented ruling had dismissed all negligence charges, while simultaneously ordering the creation of something that had never existed before, a comprehensive program pairing exceptional children with retired police dogs for mutual benefit and public service. The Phoenix PAC partnership had become a model that law enforcement agencies across the nation were scrambling to replicate. Emma Rodriguez, now 3 years old and significantly more articulate than during the trial, stood in the center of the transformed training facility, wearing a tiny vest emblazoned with Junior Handler and her name embroidered in golden thread. Her confidence around the massive German Shepherd at her side was absolute, born from a bond that had survived legal battles, media scrutiny, and the complicated process of bureaucratic innovation. Thunder, officially retired from active police duty but still in peak physical condition, wore a new collar that identified him as a community education ambassador. His transformation from feared enforcer to gentle educator had been as remarkable as Emma's journey from courthouse curiosity to pioneering partner in a revolutionary program. "Thunder, sit," Emma commanded in her clear toddler voice, and the 90-pound German Shepherd immediately complied, his dark eyes never leaving her face. The command was unnecessary. Thunder had been sitting patiently for the past 10 minutes, but Emma delighted in the formal aspects of their partnership, treating each interaction with the seriousness of someone who understood the importance of proper protocol. Dr. Amanda Foster stood nearby with a clipboard full of behavioral observations, documenting every aspect of the human-canine interaction for research purposes that would influence animal behavior studies for decades to come. Her initial analysis of Emma's abilities had evolved into a comprehensive study involving child development specialists, military working dog trainers, and neurologists fascinated by the mechanisms underlying interspecies communication. The neural pathways we've identified in Emma's brain scans are unlike anything in existing literature, Dr. Foster explained to the gathering of officials, researchers, and media representatives who had come to witness the program's official launch. Her ability to process and respond to canine communication signals operates at a subconscious level that appears to be hardwired rather than learned. Carlos Rodriguez watched his daughter work with Thunder from a position near the facility's main entrance, his military bearing softened by the pride of a father, witnessing his child's extraordinary gift being recognized and nurtured rather than feared or suppressed. His emergency leave from Afghanistan had been extended indefinitely, and he now served as the program's military liaison, helping to bridge the gap between civilian law enforcement and specialized military working dog operations. The reconciliation between Carlos and Maria had surprised everyone, including themselves. The trial had forced both parents to confront the reality that Emma's abilities required understanding and support rather than denial or overprotection. Their remarriage 2 months earlier had been a quiet courthouse ceremony attended only by Emma, Thunder, Officer Sullivan, and Judge Martinez, a symbolic closing of the legal chapter and opening of a new family story. Maria Rodriguez Martinez, she had chosen to hyphenate her name as a symbol of new beginnings, now served as the program's family coordinator, helping other military and law enforcement families understand and nurture similar abilities in their children. The Phoenix PAC partnership had identified 12 other children across Arizona who demonstrated varying degrees of advanced animal communication skills, creating a small but growing community of families navigating uncharted territory. Officer Jake Sullivan had initially resisted Thunder's retirement, but watching his former partner thrive in his new role had convinced him that some destinies transcend traditional career paths. Sullivan now split his time between training new police dogs and working with the children in Emma's program, discovering that his years of canine experience translated surprisingly well to teaching young humans about canine behavior and communication. The program's success had exceeded everyone's expectations. Children who participated showed dramatically improved confidence, communication skills, and emotional regulation. The retired police dogs experienced reduced anxiety and depression, while maintaining their sense of purpose through meaningful work. Most remarkably, bite incidents involving police dogs in Phoenix had decreased by 73% as officers trained in the program's communication techniques began applying Emma's methods to their interactions with both animals and community members. Emma's work extended beyond the training facility. 3 days a week, she and Thunder visited Phoenix elementary schools, teaching children how to safely approach and interact with working dogs. Her presentations, delivered with the earnest enthusiasm that only 3-year-olds possess, had become legendary among teachers who marveled at her ability to hold the attention of entire classrooms while discussing complex concepts of animal behavior and mutual respect. Dogs talk with their bodies, Emma would explain to wide-eyed kindergartners, demonstrating Thunder's various postures and expressions. When Thunder's ears go forward like this, he's listening very carefully. When his tail wags slowly, he's saying hello. But when his tail is stiff like a stick, he needs space to think. The educational impact rippled beyond individual presentations. Phoenix had experienced a 60% reduction in dog bite incidents involving children since the program's inception, a statistic that had caught the attention of the Centers for Disease Control and prompted discussions about national implementation. Dr. Foster's research had attracted funding from the National Science Foundation, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and several private foundations interested in the therapeutic applications of human-animal partnerships. Her team was studying whether Emma's abilities could be replicated through specialized training programs, potentially creating a new field of professional animal communication specialists. But perhaps the most profound change had occurred within the Rodriguez family itself. Emma's gifts were no longer a source of confusion or concern, but a celebration of the extraordinary diversity of human capabilities. Carlos had taken a permanent assignment at Luke Air Force Base outside Phoenix, where he was developing new training protocols based on Emma's natural techniques. Maria had returned to school to study animal-assisted therapy, inspired by witnessing her daughter's impact on both humans and animals. As the afternoon sun streamed through the training facility's newly installed skylights, Emma concluded her demonstration by having Thunder perform a complex series of commands that showcased their partnership's sophistication. The assembled audience watched in amazement as a 3-year-old girl and a retired police dog moved together with the precision of dancers, communicating through a language that transcended words and touched something fundamental about the connections that bind all living creatures. The final moment of the demonstration came when Emma sat cross-legged on the floor and Thunder lay down beside her, resting his massive head in her lap. In the comfortable silence that followed, surrounded by the people who had fought for their partnership and the officials who now supported it, the true significance of their bond became clear. This wasn't just about a remarkable child and an exceptional dog. It was about recognizing that some gifts emerge from the intersection of circumstance, genetics, and love in ways that challenge our understanding of what's possible. It was about creating spaces where extraordinary abilities could flourish, rather than be feared or suppressed. As Emma whispered secrets into Thunder's attentive ear, secrets about adventures they would share, children they would teach, and the bright future spreading before them like an endless horizon, the Phoenix Pack partnership prepared to welcome its next group of remarkable children and their 4-legged partners in the ancient dance of interspecies understanding and mutual devotion.